if you're not sure how to get started on something, apparently you just make a bet and lose it, and then you get started. And that's a way to kind of kickstart getting something done. Welcome, everybody, to your show. My name's Eric Alvarez, and I'm here this week with a special guest, somebody I've known for quite some time. I want to say we met maybe at some point in high school, if not shortly after, but she's somebody that I've known for, again, quite some time. So I'd like to bring her in already. Sara Garza. Sara, how are you?
Hi, I'm doing great.
Cool.
It's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's actually been a while since I've talked to you. I have you on social media, kind of been following along. Every now and then I'll shoot you a message. It just says like, hey, are you doing, such and such? And you're like, yeah. And I'm like, cool. That's awesome. Like, keep it up kind of thing. And that's about it. But kind of keeping track. And I wanted to bring you on here because I saw something that you posted not too long ago about how, which by the way, if you, the listener, are listening to this and you happen to not know like who Sara Garza is a comedian, and she's been doing some great stuff. She's been keeping busy. Not just in Laredo, but around Texas. If I'm not mistaken, you've been doing quite a bit of shows out of town. And I think there was one pretty big event. I mean, there's been several big events, but the one that comes to mind was like the ladies kind of night or something like that. That it was like with Edema, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yes. The Chingona shows that we did around Texas. It was really exciting, really great opportunity. I love all of those women. They're all very distinctive in their own cities, and it was just such a great experience. Yeah,
for sure. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. Before we get into Sara's stories, though, so Sara is a comedian. I've been seeing her again post on social media, and I reached out to Sara. I said, hey, you know what? Not only do I want to have you on the show because of what you're doing in comedy, but also there was a very important post that she made in regards to mental health. And that is something that we always try to kind of bring to the show, which is like, hey, look, there's people going through all sorts of stuff, right? And the idea of this show is that we bring on people to share their journey, whether they're a comedian like Sara, or maybe they're a tennis player, or they're a professional wrestler, or they're an actor, or they're just somebody who's maybe like a principal at a school or a business owner, anything like that, like any aspect in life. And we bring them on to share their journey. And the reason for that is because we're hoping that maybe there's something in somebody's journey that a listener can hear and say, hey, you know what, like maybe I can do something like Sara's doing, or maybe I can do something, there's a certain little aspect in Sara's story that I can apply to my own situation. So it's the very least, like maybe there's takeaways in all these people's journeys, because not everyone's journey is the same. Everyone has different avenues and paths that they follow or that happen to them and circumstances and stuff like that. But maybe there's just that story out there that will help you kind of stay on track, or maybe there's a new kind of lesson or takeaway. So brought Sara on to share her journey in comedy, and then we're gonna talk a little bit about kind of like the mental health aspect and why it's important to take care of yourself, even if you're doing something you love. It's very easy to get burnt out or to get overwhelmed, and there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, you know what, time out, I need a break. So Sara, are you ready to get started on your journey?
Yes, definitely.
All right. So comedian, the first question I can think of obviously would be, how did you get started in comedy? Because oftentimes people are like, hey, going on stage by myself, like, are you, I don't know. And then there's some people that are like, yeah, you know what, like it feels natural. Like I want to go up there, I want to be in the spotlight, whatever it is. Did somebody ask you to do it, or were you just kind of like thinking about it on your own?
No, I do remember I had met Sosa, from before, and back when he was in a band and everything, and he would invite me to the open mics as an audience member, and I would hang out with him and George, and they would encourage me. They're like, well, you should sign up, but I was terrified of being on the spotlight, being on the stage. Like I couldn't do karaoke unless I was drunk, like that. I was very much not me. But the honest reason of how I got started was I lost a bet.
Oh.
And yeah, no, that's kind of how that started. I lost a
Okay.
bet, and so they made me go up on stage, the guys, and I told them, I was like, okay, I lost the bet, so I'm gonna do it, but give me like 2 weeks and y'all have to help me like with my joke or whatever. Like, so I wrote my first joke and it was about 5 minutes long.
Yeah.
It was just all over the place.
Yeah.
I was so nervous and everything inside me was telling me to leave, and I did it. And then it was such a great response, you know, people coming up to me asking me like, you know, oh my God, you know, was it so and so, or like, I know someone like that, or like, oh my God, I've gone through that. And after that moment, I was like, oh my God, I love this. And I just never stopped, you know.
Gotcha. Yeah. So there are two things that I want to go over right off the bat from what you just said. One, you, the listener, if you're not sure how to get started on something, apparently you just make a bet and lose it, and then you get started. And that's a way to kind of kickstart getting something done, right? Because Sara, let's be honest, if that bet wasn't made, or if you had won whatever the bet was, would you have gone up on stage ever? Like, do you think that would have been like,
No, never. I mean, yeah, no, like I'm the last person you would expect to become a comedian. Like, I think I do remember you from high school, and I just feel like I'm the least person in the class reunion that you would ever expect to be a comedian.
Yeah.
It's kind of wild, you know. 5 years ago, I never saw this, and now I'm a comedian. You know, like,
For
it
sure.
still blows my mind, you know.
Yeah. And the other thing is, just real quick, for anybody that does not know, when Sara mentions Sosa, she's talking about Steven Sosa, and she mentions my brother, George Alvarez. They are also comedians. It is part of a group, Laredo Funny, which kind of like Sosa's the one that kind of got started with. I remember he started doing comedy, and that wasn't really going on around town. So just references to that. You might hear their names come up a couple more times, but just want to throw that out there. And then again, if you're not sure how to get started on something, just make a bet and lose. So Sara, when you first go up there, first of all, from what I remember from meeting you, was you're always very quiet. You were just kind of like an observer almost, where like you could hang out, but you weren't like, hey, everybody, look at me. You're kind of just like, oh, that's funny. Oh, that's cool. You know, whatever. Right. Did you ever do any sort of performance or anything on stage before comedy? Were you maybe like in some sort of performance, like band, or were you anything like that? Was there some sort of performance in your life?
Oh yeah. I was in choir in elementary school, and I was in band in middle school and high school. I also did a lot of work with the church. I would be part of the church choirs and do, you know, retreats and things like that growing up. So I always had that, I guess, that background of performing.
Yeah.
But it never really solo. Like, even in band, I was always afraid of the solos. But playing together and making music with everybody else, that was my thing. Like, I just wanted to be one noise in a sea of noises.
Yeah, for sure.
I never wanted to stand out, per se.
Yeah.
But that was my experience with performing.
Gotcha.
Before comedy.
Yeah, I am not a comedian. I've done a couple open mics, but I remember from my personal experience, I was like, well, I've been playing music for years. I performed in front of thousands of people. Like, surely I can go up in front of 20 people, or however many were at that first open mic that I did, you know? And I was like, yeah, I can do that. And
you were good. You're funny.
Thank you. And then I get up there and I'm like, holy shit, this is different, because it's just me. Like, there's nobody else up here, and it's just a different kind of vibe when you have like a band with you or other people on stage with you, and then you're by yourself. It's kind of like, oh snap, you know, that kind of thing. So it is quite an adjustment. So even though you have like maybe like some sort of like public speaking, or like you said, choir, anything like that, it's just a different vibe when you're by yourself on there, you know?
Yeah.
So
people don't even get to dance. It's just your
it's
just your voice. You know?
Yeah, exactly. And it's a thing where, since you're talking, everyone for the most part becomes quiet, and they just kind of turn and look, and you're kind of just like, oh, okay. You know, obviously there will be some crowds, or there will be some people that kind of just continue doing what they're doing. But for the most part, if you're doing comedy enough, you will see both aspects of that. You will see people that are just talking, whatever, and then you see the people that next thing you know, it's completely quiet and everyone's just focused on you, and you're like, oh snap, like that kind of thing. So when you first got started, how long ago was that? You mentioned like 5 years. Is that more or less what it was, or?
Yeah, it's coming up on 5 years. I'll be 5 years doing comedy in this July.
Oh, okay.
So in a few months, it'll be 5 years officially.
So after that first time, you mentioned you come off stage and people are coming up to you and they're saying, "Oh, I relate to whatever you said," whatever it was. How does that make you feel, right? Because I imagine when you first go up there, you're unsure, you're not really, would it be fair to say that you weren't too confident because you didn't know what was going to happen? Am I right?
Yeah. Oh no, I wasn't confident at all.
Okay.
It's so nerve-wracking. But then, my name comes up and they're like Sara Garza, and it's like I either run out the door or I have to jump on the stage. It's one or the other.
For sure.
So I chose to jump on the stage. It's still just as frightening to this day. So they announce your name, I go on the stage, and all of that anxiety just turns into like adrenaline for me, and I'm under the spotlight, and it's like, okay, well now I got to do it, and so it is very, very scary because I don't know how it's going to go over. Are people going to laugh? Are people going to talk? Are they going to boo me? Like, God forbid, like I get slapped, like, you don't know, right?
For sure.
It's terrifying, but it's so amazing for me to have people come up to me afterwards and tell me that they related to something that I said. I feel like there's a big human connection that I feel with the audience whenever someone tells me that, and I feel like it's very reaffirming and very reassuring of I think I tapped into something there. And the power of just my words giving, reaching out to some stranger, and they felt this connection and they laugh, and it's like sharing in that experience. And for me, I think it's very therapeutic. It's very helpful. It's very encouraging, and I absolutely love it.
So you come off stage again, people compliment you. Are you immediately thinking about the next time that you're going to go up on stage, or is there kind of like that was a one and done kind of thing? It was cool. I mean, what is it? Because sometimes some people, some performers, the first time they go up, all they need is a little taste, and then they're, you know what I mean? Like they want to go up again, and they want to go up again. What was that like for you? What's your experience there? If you remember, that time.
Stage is, it's really, you get off stage, you're like, man, that was fun. Like, I want to do that again. Unless you bomb, and then you're just like, oh my God, I want to die. But yeah, no, it's very addicting. And like whether you do good or you do bad, as soon as you get off that stage, it's like, okay, well that happened, on to the next one. Like I did good today. What am I still going to do good tomorrow? Like it's back to work. It's, all over again, because one day could be great. One day could be, terrible, experience, or it's back and forth. It's just like life, not every event is perfect, and, things like that. But yeah, no, I always feel the urge to get back on stage and do it again.
So that first, again, staying on that first time, we have a tendency, and I say we as like performers, I know when I was doing the music stuff, if we had a bad show, we would get off stage and people would be like, oh my God, that was great. And we would make the mistake of being like, no, it sucked. No, it was bad. This and that. And it's kind of like, I think about it now, and I learned this along the way. If you're a performer and anybody ever comes up to you and says, hey, that was great, do not ever tell them, no, it sucked. Just thank them, agree with them, kind of thing. Because one, you're kind of taking away that kind of image of yourself from their eyes, right? They see you as like a comedian.
Mm-hmm.
Oh wow, you're funny, you're a comedian. And if you go like, oh no, I suck, then it's kind of like, okay, then what the fuck? Why was I, why was I just watching you? You know what I mean, kind of thing. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like, people come up to you, they say, hey, great job, whatever, like that. Do you ever feel like, oh no, that was bad? Like, do you ever, or at least that first time, did you feel like, oh no, like why did you guys laugh at that? Or I mean, were you ever confused as far as like the response that people gave you, or what did that do for you?
Yeah, I have been very confused. I mean, to be fair though, I'm usually my own worst critic.
Mm-hmm.
Notice the mistakes that I make
Mm-hmm.
in my own set. And when I get off stage, I'll be like, I forgot this punchline, and I messed up the order, and this joke didn't go over so well. And other comics or people would be like, oh my god, yeah, you were really funny. And I'm just like, oh, were you watching that? It was terrible, but like,
yeah.
But it's my own worst critic, and I think most artists are.
Yeah.
And so, like, I think it's yeah, and you're right. It does make for a bad image, and so I learned to like not do that and just kind of keep my own comments to myself.
Yeah. For sure.
But yeah, there's been times where there was this one time where I messed up the order on my jokes. I was so nervous, and I was in El Paso, and I was so nervous. I messed up the order of my jokes, and I forgot punchline. And because I forgot that punchline, I paused for like a little too long. So then I went to a different punchline, and then I remembered and I recovered, and I messed up the orders of the punchlines.
Yeah.
And because I paused for so long, each punchline I had to pause just as long to make it seem like I didn't mess up. I didn't just forget my own joke on stage. Afterwards, I come back, and there was even comedians that were like, oh my god, Sarah, that was amazing. Your pacing, your timing, you did like this Chris Rock thing. Like, I don't know, like they were just like, I was like, dude, I was so nervous. I was pacing because I was nervous. Like I was, but they saw it as like, oh my god, it was genius. And I'm just like, oh my god, I fucked up so bad. Yeah. I'm sorry for cursing. I don't know.
No, you're good.
Allowed.
You're
okay.
Fine. Jesus will just no longer sponsor my podcast, but it's fine. It's cool. By the way, so right now you mentioned there was a mistake, maybe messed up, accident, anything like that. Have you ever come across like a happy accident, kind of like, hey, that was a mistake, but it worked. Like maybe I should just roll with that, or incorporate something like that into my set. Has that ever happened?
There's times. It's usually like when it happens in the moment. Like if I get like a heckler that will try to contribute to my joke or whatever, and they shout something out and I shout something back, and it gets a laugh. I'm like, oh well, maybe I can use that, maybe I can look into incorporate it into my joke, so that way next time I already bring it up before a heckler can already so it's usually just like whenever I go off the cuff on the audience. Mm-hmm. That's usually when I like to go off the cuff, when I'm feeling the vibe of the audience. When the audience starts participating, I kind of go a little off the cuff, and that's usually when I come up with something that I'm like, oh yeah, that worked. Hey,
and that's the thing, is you kind of have to like leave yourself that room to be able to kind of improvise and whatnot, because you could write down like a joke, and in your head you're like, this is the way the joke's gonna go, like this is the funny part, but the audience could find a different part of it, or they could kind of give you a certain feedback, and you're like, oh shit, maybe I was focusing on the wrong part. Like I know we've done that with music. It's just like every performer has to kind of give yourself, don't ever be like, no, you're not supposed to laugh there, you're supposed to laugh. Like no, like the crowd is the one that decides like kind of what goes on and stuff like that. So we're going to continue our conversation with Sarah. Before we do, we got to go to commercial break. Make sure you follow us on social media. It is Eric Alvarez Presents Your Show on Instagram and Facebook. Our TikTok, I think, is called Your Show Podcast. Just look us up on there. We post little funny videos on there. And then we have a YouTube page that we're slowly building out. It is Eric Alvarez Presents Your Show. So again, stick around. We'll be back in just a few. Welcome back to your show. Eric Alvarez here with Sara Garza. Sara, comedian. We talked about kind of the experience of that first time. And one of the things that, again, apparently the way you got started was you lost a bet. Now, if you don't mind me asking, what was that bet? Do you mind sharing that with us?
Long time ago, and I don't exactly remember who was in on the bet, but I do remember what the bet was, and because I would hang out with the comics, I would go to the open mics, and I would also like kind of give them like tags or like the female perspective on their jokes. And I was like, how come you guys don't have any women? Like, how come, you know? And they're like, we've tried to get women to sign up. We can't. And I was like, what do you mean you haven't tried? Like, you can try. Like, I'm sure there's writers. Like, I would frequent the Laredo Border Slams. I still make it as often as I can. The Laredo Border Slam people. And I was like, we have a lot of creative writers here in Laredo. A lot of very talented women that are very great writers. I'm sure, you know, with a little help, they can, you know, maybe write a few jokes or something.
Yeah.
And so basically it was like, all right, if you think you can do it, Sara, because I was very stubborn. Yeah. Like, if you think you can do it, then do it. But if you can't get a woman to sign up, then you have to do it. And so, like, as stubborn as I was like, all right, bet, let's do this, you know? Yeah. To which I lost.
Gotcha.
I think as many women were interested at the time in comedy. I don't think they really realized that there was stand-up comedy here in Laredo. It was still at the very beginning. So it was probably like the first year of Laredo Funny. They had just been established. So, but yeah, so ever since then, it was like, well, shit, now I'm a female doing comedy. And really, I just kept doing it. I had no plans of being a traveling comedian. Like, all I wanted to do was like, well, if I'm doing this and other women see that I'm doing this, then maybe they think, oh, maybe I can do it too. And I wanted to inspire more women to do that. Like, I wish I had a female comedy mentor when I started, because all I had was the guys. Yeah. And so now I'm just like, you know, whenever I see a woman sign up, I'm like, yes, you know, we need more women in comedy. Like, yes. Yeah. And I've met so many other women in comedy, like in Corpus and San Antonio, things like that. And they've become some of my very best friends. But, you know, like I said, anytime that there's a female comic that signs up, I'm like, yes. And I feel like I scare them off sometimes with, like, you know, let me help you, let me work with you. Like, you know, like I think I get a little, they're just like, oh, okay, well, I tried it. Okay. I'm not, you know, not sold yet. I don't know. I get very excited, and I feel like I kind of push them away maybe. Gotcha.
Has there been a shift? So you were kind of going to these open mics around town before you even signed up yourself. You would just kind of go watch shows. Have you seen a shift, not just in comedians signing up being maybe more females, but the crowd itself having more females in there? Has there been a shift in that?
Oh yeah. I think women love to go out and enjoy a comedy show. I'm always glad when there's women in the audience. I feel like I'm like, okay, I feel a little bit better that, you know, my perspective is going to be, you know, there's less of a chance of a guy shouting at me like, take off your shirt or something, you know. And there's more women in the audience. I feel safer.
Which, like, you make that joke, but I'm wondering if that's kind of like the general thought for a woman to go up on stage when it's like a bunch of dudes at first, because that's the way these open mics were it was mostly guys performing. So I would assume that most of the crowd is maybe like male. So there's kind of like a, hey, not only am I putting myself in the spotlight, but I'm a female putting myself in the spotlight. That is a bigger risk. Now, there's always been that conversation of like women in comedy and stuff like that. I've always thought that was like BS, where people are like, oh, women can't do, like, it has nothing to do with gender. but I could see how it could be maybe intimidating to put yourself out there, not just as a person, but as a female in front of a bunch of guys who, a bunch of open mic performers, you know, are making these jokes that are maybe a little bit vulgar, a little bit too vulgar and stuff like that. And it could scare, you know, some people off, male or female, you know? So I just wonder if there was a shift from like you now performing to now maybe there's a few more females signing up. I know I've seen a few, I've gone to a couple and I've seen a couple more females go up there and stuff like that. And it's a little bit more of like, hey, now this isn't just a guy, like this isn't just a guy thing. This is for anyone who wants to just come and have a good time. And that's the vibe that I've got in the times that I've gone, where it's like, it doesn't feel awkward. It doesn't feel weird for anybody. It feels like, hey, we're just here to have a good time. Like everyone's just here to laugh. Like, why can't we all enjoy that, you know? So you were trying to get females to sign up. Did they ever say, well, why don't you just sign up? Did they ever tell you that?
Not really, because I don't think any of them saw me as being funny.
They're like, oh, okay.
Like you said, you know, I've always been kind of the quiet type.
Yeah.
Just observational, just kind of like in the background. Like I don't, you know, so I don't think no one, you know, hey, you should be a comedian. Like I've never heard that in my life.
Yeah. Which, by the way, we were talking about how you may not have ever done this if there wasn't that bet. Isn't it kind of like the lesson here of like, hey, you'll never know until you try it, right?
Exactly. You never know unless you try. And for me, I needed that sort of kick, you know, that you know, to, you know, light a fire so I can kind of, you know, I needed to be pushed on stage.
Yeah.
Because they're such great friends.
Yeah.
But like I said, you never know unless you try. And there have been so many people that have been so funny, and just, you know, you go up there once and just talk about your day and just kills the room, you know, and then, you know, they're just like, oh, well, that was fun. And then they, you know, don't come back ever for like 6 months. And then, you know, like, yeah, like there's a lot of people that you wouldn't think, but once you go up there and you tell your story, a lot more people are connected than you think. And I think Laredo has also been very supportive of each other and of comedians and everything. You're talking about the differences between the crowds back then and the crowds now. I think a lot of the crowds now are way more supportive. They're interested. They want to hear comedy. They see that it's a thing, and they want to see, you know, how we've gotten better, how we're building, how we're doing, and they want to laugh.
Yeah. From what I've noticed, the crowds at the beginning, you know, years ago, because again, there wasn't really a comedy scene or anything like that here in Laredo that I can recall until Steven Sosa started doing it. And if I'm not mistaken, a lot of the rooms before that were, hey, can everybody quiet down? We're trying to do comedy here. And now it's just like everybody knows, like, hey, we're going to be quiet. Like, we're here to see a comedy show. We're not here to, you know, like it's changed. Like, it's no longer like, oh, I'm at a bar and, oh, there's a comedy show going. No, it's like, hey, I'm here because there's a comedy show going on, whether it's an open mic or a show by Laredo Funny or whoever else that's going on around town. So I want to talk a little bit about your kind of like material, the source material. Are you often looking at like daily observations of like what you go through? I mean, what do you look for inspiration when coming up with material?
I get asked that a lot, and really it's just the inspiration for my material. It comes out of, you know, my life, really. Sometimes it's funny instances in my life, and sometimes it's tragic instances in my life. There's times where I'll write about a breakup and it's a good joke, but I can't deliver it yet because it's still too fresh to me. Or, you know, things like that. And it's so it makes it harder. But once I'm able to heal from that relationship and I work on that joke and then I'm able to say it and everything, and it's just like all of that pain kind of goes away.
Yeah.
And it turns into laughter and, you know, helps my career. So, like, you know, I guess, I don't know. It's just everyday life observations and experiences that I go through and things that I see and things that I feel and things that I think.
Yeah. There's I wish I could remember the exact quote. I can't, but I remember the meaning and the message of it. And it was Jeff Foxworthy, obviously a famous comedian. And he was talking about like what makes a comedian. And one of the quotes that he said was along the lines of like, a comedian is somebody who can take a daily observation and like it just happens, or it goes into one ear and it comes out the other side in a joke. Like you're able to, hey, you know what, maybe this shitty thing happened or whatever, and like, yeah, there's something kind of funny there. Like it's somebody that can take all these daily musings or daily observations and turn it into something. And one of the things that we've talked about before on the show, if I'm not mistaken, is sometimes it helps just to write stuff down, right? And maybe you're not necessarily like trying to remember, but like there's something therapeutic for some people where it's like, hey, you know what, let me have a journal or let me have a diary and stuff like that. And I think, I could be wrong, but I think a comedian is kind of in that sense when they're using their own daily life. It's kind of like, you know what, I need to have something to help express what I'm feeling or to help whatever, right? So I'm going to write down on this notebook. And then as you're writing, you're kind of just like, oh, you know what, like this might be a joke. You know what I mean? Like there's a joke in here and that kind of thing. And the important thing about being any sort of performer, again, comedian, musician, a wrestler, anything like that, there has to be a connection with the audience. And what better way to make a connection than by taking this personal shit that you've written down, because you know that there are 10 other people or however many people that have gone through something like that, or they know somebody that went through it like that. Do you find it kind of similar to that, where like, hey, I'm just writing stuff down to help me out, like, and then it's, oh shit, I have material?
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, all the time. It shocks me, you know, sometimes just how relatable the material can end up being. And it's just something that I thought of, or something I said, something I went through. And it's just so satisfying to see what that, you know, how that relates to other people.
Do you have, if you don't mind sharing this with us, do you kind of have like writing sessions? Do you ever like, because I know some, like for instance, like an author will sit down and say, hey, you know what, it's time for me to write. Like, let me take these next however many hours and let me just write. Or are you kind of just going about your life and you're like, oh shit, I need a pen. I need to write this down. Something just happened. I need to remember this. Or is it both?
It's both, really. You have to make time to write. You have to make time to work on your jokes. But, you know, usually it's just, you go about your day and a funny thought or a funny thing comes to your mind and it's like, okay, I have to write it down. My phone is, in my notes, full of just half-assed, you know, like premises and jokes and just random things. Like sometimes you wouldn't even know what I'm talking about.
Do you? Like, I mean, do you go back?
Like to me,
No, I'm saying, do you ever go back and you're like, what the fuck does that mean? Like, I don't even remember. What were they like? Is that
only if I wrote it when I was drunk.
Okay, yeah.
Sure. But no, you do actually have to make time to write, and you know, I have a bunch of notebooks just full. Like I feel like I memorize my jokes better when I write them out fully. Like there's a difference between typing and just writing, and I feel like when I physically write it out, I memorize it better. And then, you know, the grammar Nazi in me is like, oh no, that's, you know, we should move it over here, and this, you know, like it needs a pause right here, you know, like but it's like a physical, sorry, my dog's here. It's like a physical outline of my joke, and I get to work on it and everything. But the writing sessions, with my friends as well. Like I usually like to get feedback from some of the other comics. So sometimes, you know, me and Lord Funny, like we'll try to get together and be like, hey, you know, like let's have a writing session at my house. Everyone bring out your notebooks. We go around the room. You know, what's your joke? What joke are you working on? Okay, and then they tell it, and they're like, okay, well, you know, maybe you should add this. Maybe you should, you know, maybe cut out this, or you know, this is too much, or maybe word it like this. And just kind of like helping each other, just like, you know, just a brainstorm, kind of like a feedback kind of thing. You know, it's like you could take the advice or leave it, but it's good to have that. I also do that with a lot of my comedian friends from out of town. You know, they'll hit me up, they'll message me, you know, comedians from Colorado or whatever, like they'll message me and they'll be like, hey, I just thought of this joke, what do you think? And you know, they'll send me the joke, and then I let them know, like, oh, you know, that's funny, or like, oh, this is, and just it's always good to get feedback from other comedians and stuff, because you don't know if it's funny, and or you know that there's something there but it's maybe not right. And then the best time to work on the joke is obviously in front of an audience at the open mic.
Yeah, it's the really
even if you're
only way to find out. Yeah, that's the way to find out.
Your friends can think you're funny, but unless the audience thinks you're funny, you're not funny. You know,
yeah, it's different when it's like a room full of friends and a room full of strangers. The strangers will be honest most of the time, and your friends may just say what they think you want to hear, or they want to be supportive, and they're not trying to be mean. They're just supportive. Friends are just supportive. So they're just like, yeah, you know what, that was good. But like a stranger will just be like, well, I have no loyalty to you. I can say whatever I want. I could say if it was bad or good or whatever, right? Now, a thing that we haven't touched on is you could be the funniest person out there, but there has to be storytelling involved in what you're doing. Were you ever a storyteller? Did you ever, like you mentioned, you have to write stuff down. Were you ever like a writer? Were you a reader? Or I mean, what's your storytelling experience, either as an audience member or as a writer?
I've always been a big reader and writer. I would get awards and stuff in school for my writings. You know, I guess I was always a good storyteller, but I'm also very OCD about my writing too. Like I'll get a thesaurus, you know, like I want the exact right, like I want to present my point exactly the way that I want it, you know, to sound, or how I want it to come out. And, I'm doing a terrible job of it right now, but I don't have my thesaurus with me. But I'm always very OCD about my writing, and my English teachers love that about me, though.
Yeah,
you know, they looked forward to reading my papers and things like that. So, I mean, I guess I was always more of a writer than anything. I was always the shy, quiet one, but I was writing.
Yeah, for sure. But that definitely helps. I mean, because again, you can be the funniest person out there, but if you don't have that storytelling aspect down, you're kind of just up there rambling, and it's kind of like the audience could not connect to that. You know, like there's some people I know, they are the funniest when you're having a conversation with them, when you're hanging out with them, they're the funniest person, and they go up on stage and it's kind of like something's missing. Like, what is it? Like, you're funny, like when I'm talking to you, but when you go up on, it's because there's a performance, there's a storytelling, there's you know, there's more involved than just being funny, and I think that's important, where you have to have some sort of storytelling, whether you're a natural storyteller or you're somebody that's just been writing, whether it's a journal, you know, short stories, whatever. It just kind of helps to have that stuff. So we're going to continue our conversation with Sara. We're going to go to commercial break. Before we do, Sara, where can people find you on social media?
Right now you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Sara Garza Comedy. That's Sara Garza, Sara with no H, by the way. It's Sara. Sara Garza Comedy on Facebook and Instagram.
Okay. How many times do people put that H in there? And does that bother you?
You'd be surprised.
Okay, yeah, I'm very picky about the way my name is spelled. I'm like, there's no K in there. It's just C. Because some people put CK, and I'm like, nope. Not me, not for me. Anyway, follow Sara on social media. and we'll be back in just a few. Welcome back to your show. Eric here with Sarah. Sarah, I think we've had a fun conversation about how you got started in comedy, just kind of the different little processes and stuff like that. One of the things that I wanted to mention, it was just a funny little story, not having to do with comedy, but you mentioned how in your phone there will be like these random kind of little premises and stuff like that. And I asked like, hey, have you ever gone back and just looked at it and be like, what the fuck does that mean? And you're like, well, that happens when I'm drunk. And I want to share this story. It's about me. It has nothing to do with Sarah, nothing to do with comedy, but it's just a funny story. There was this one night many years ago where I went out drinking with some friends and I had a great time. And I remember there was this girl that I was talking to and it was going pretty well that night. The next day I woke up and I looked at I kind of like woke up, I looked at my hand and there was a phone number smeared on my hand. And I was like, what the fuck is this? You know? And then I just had like one of those like flashbacks where like I replayed the whole night in my head, you know, like the night before. And I was like, because I was thinking like, why would a phone number be written on my hand? Because if not mistaken, everybody's like this now. Whenever you get a phone number, you just pull out your phone and just type it in, right? I mean, yeah. So why would
who writes on the hand anymore?
So why would a phone number be written? I was like, that's weird. And I replayed the whole night, and then I remembered the exact moment that I was asking this girl for her number. I pulled out my phone, but I was so drunk I couldn't type in the numbers. So she legit just went. Oh my goodness. She legit just let out a big sigh and just went here, and she picked up my hand, wrote down the number, and said there. And I was like, well, the next morning I'm looking at my hand, I'm like, well, fuck, I can't text her now. Like, I just made an ass out of myself. I mean, I still got the number, so maybe I should try. But I was like, I'm not. Yeah. I don't know.
I just feel like you're bragging now that you could be so drunk and still get a chick's number. Wasted. Like you're just bragging at this point.
that is one of the funniest things where I'm like, why am I hand like, who does that? And then I was like, oh shit, it wasn't because she's weird, it's because I was just so drunk I couldn't do it on my phone. Anyway, back to Sarah. Sarah, it's been again a fun conversation. We mentioned a lot of the good stuff that's come from comedy, right? And would it be safe to say that you love doing what you're doing?
Yes.
Did you think you would love it? Like when you first, again, did you ever think like, man, I love this more than I thought I would?
No, I really just fell down the rabbit hole with this whole comedy thing. You know, yeah. I like I said, you know, years ago, I never thought I could, you know, be on stage telling jokes.
And from there, you've gone over the years, you've started doing a little bit more shows in Laredo, and then you started spreading out of town, right? Your first out of town gig, and then you get invited for another one. And you're growing. I mean, it's a growing, still is growing fan base or kind of like recognition, right? So it's like fun. It's great. It's all, when you think about it, I feel like the amount of time is going by really, like for what you've done, it's a short amount of time. Usually people just you know, stick in their hometown for a while and stuff like that. And you started spreading out. And even though it's been, you know, 4 or 5 years or whatever it is, it's still like pretty like, wow, that's
that's lightning fast.
Yeah, that's a lot. And one of the things that we mentioned at the top of the show was mental health. What I want to bring up was you're doing all these shows. You started going out of town. It's all happening kind of rather fast, I think.
Very fast.
Is there a toll that's taken on you where you're kind of like, hey, I'm having a great time, but hold on 1 second? Or is it just like, no, I'm having a great time, let's continue going? I mean, what is that for you? Is there a toll being taken?
Yeah, no, let me just tell you, it gets really exhausting. I did once with the Chingona tour and just started hitting all of these huge clubs across Texas, and just everything just lightning fast. You know, the bookings started coming in, and I feel like these few past months have just blown by. I've spent more holidays on the road than I have at home. I you know, and it feels like it's going so fast that I can't really get a chance to just stop and smell the roses, you know, which I think is really important, because it does take a toll on my mental health. And you know, it's got to be like a work-life balance, because with comedy there's no clock. You don't punch in, you don't punch out. It's just a constant, like, you just live comedy. And you know, even, you know, I go to a grocery store or something, and it's like, oh yeah, you're that comedian, you know. It's like, yeah. But like, it's lightning fast, and it really takes a toll. I'm overexerting myself. The long drives, you know. It just, it gets really overwhelming.
Yeah.
You know, and so I think I've been trying to take some time to work on myself right now.
Which I want to point out that because Sara is saying, hey, you know, I'm exhausted, I need to take time for myself, that does not mean that she doesn't love what she's doing, because you can very much love what you're doing.
Yes.
But you're still human, right? You still need to take that time to step away or to step back and just kind of, hey, give me a second, right? And I say that because when we were doing the music stuff, we were touring across the country. And even though people are like, man, that's fun. Like, what are you complaining about? Like, you're doing this, you're traveling, and it's like, dude, like, it does have an effect on you, even though it's something I love doing.
Yeah, I want to point out something. I was booked in SPI, South Padre Island, Texas, and it was at this super luxurious resort, and it was amazing. And I remember I took pictures, and it just looked so nice and so fancy, and people are just probably looking at my Facebook thinking like, oh my god, you know, like, how fabulous, how glamorous, and things like that. But it's like, dude, even though they got me a hotel room, I couldn't spend the night. I had to drive back to Laredo because I had another show in McAllen the next day that I had to, you know, it's like, I had to drive. I had 3 different cities in one weekend. Each of those cities, I drove to that city, performed, and drove back to Laredo that same night, and then had to do it again the next day, different city, and then drive back to Laredo. It's like, do you know how many hours that is on the road in 3 days? Like, it's exhausting, and it kind of sucks, because it's like, man, you know, like, I wish I did get in the pool, you know, like, I kind of wish I did get to enjoy it.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's exhausting, and people might see like, oh yeah, that's cool and everything, but like, they don't see the background, like what happens behind the scenes, so to speak.
And I think anytime you're any sort of performer, even as an actor or anything like that, when you're a performer, people just expect you to be on 100% of the time, where if you can't have time for yourself, you know what I mean? Like, if somebody sees you, or if somebody's around you, whether they're like a fan or anything, or they just know you from that, they're expecting you to be, hey, you're a comedian, why aren't you being funny right now? Like, why aren't you making me? It's like, dude, like, hold on, you know what I mean? Like, I can take a break for myself, right? So how do you go about, like, I guess I would ask, you recognize, hey, you know what, I need a break, right? How do you go about presenting that to your peers? Because it's very easy for somebody to be like, what do you mean you need a break? Like, no, come on, get on. Like, there's these shows to get done, stuff like that. how do you go about approaching that? Are you just firm and confident with what your decision is, or are you kind of like, I don't know, maybe you're right, maybe I should just continue doing it?
It's really hard because I have a love for comedy. Like, don't get me wrong, I love comedy, and I feel like comedy has been so therapeutic for me and has done so much for me personally, for myself, and you know, accepting myself, and like just a lot. I mean, a whole mesh of things. So comedy has always been very important to me. It's like I need it to feel better, and at the same time, when it's also the thing that's, you know, taking me away from being a normal person, from my enjoying everyday life, and you know, you kind of just spiral into this, you know, like, well, who am I kind of thing. And if you lose yourself, you're not going to be able to tell any jokes.
Yeah.
Because that's the whole point. So it's definitely hard to tear myself away. A lot of comedians, though, have come out being super supportive. They've all shared with me their stories of, hey, you know, like, I have to take breaks every now and then too. Like, it's okay. You know, I'm still on a break. I have, you know, and it's so encouraging to see that I'm not alone.
Yeah.
In that, and that it's okay, and that people are reassuring me that it's okay. But then there's still that overwhelming fear that everything that I've worked to build up to this point, if I stop now, I could lose it all.
Yeah.
And that's a real fear that I have, but I'm very confident in my decision to just kind of step back and take a little bit of a break. I still have my dates. I have 2 shows this month. I have a few more in May. But just kind of like pumping the brakes. I did 7 shows in March alone, and all of them in different cities.
Yeah.
Just kind of like, okay, you know, let me kind of space out my dates, kind of, you know, give myself time to work on myself, you know. I think it's very, very important, and I've been working avidly on that. My sister's been very helpful. My family's been very helpful and supportive. My comedy friends have been very supportive. And yeah, I think it's just necessary, because even if you love what you're doing, you know, you need to put yourself first.
Yeah. Well, because you could also, like, you could love what you're doing, but if you do it so much, you could not love, you know, what you're doing anymore, right? Like, the love can be taken away, and you realize, hey, you know what? It's because I didn't take a break or whatever it was, right?
You can love something so much until it kills you, you know, like, basically.
And that's the thing. It's what I was trying to get at, is that people often have a fear of taking a break. I know, I don't want to talk too much about it, but I know when, like, 2020 COVID was going on, people were like, what do you mean I have to stay? Like, what do you mean I have to take a break from doing, like, people just kind of panicked of like, what do you mean I have to take a break? I can't take a break. It's like, hold on. Like, and that was obviously taking a break for a different reason. But my point is, like, we have a fear that taking a break means like it's over, or meaning that we're going to be taken away from it. And we also have that fear that if we tell our friends or we tell our peers, hey, you know what, I'm going to, you know, step back, I'm going to do whatever, that we have a fear that they're going to be like, what do you mean? Like, come on. Because it's been like that for me in music and sports. And anything, there's always going to be that person or those people that say, what do you mean? Like, come on, like, suck it up or whatever. And it's like, no, you know, like, and so it must feel awesome to have those friends and those peers that are saying, hey, you know what? I've done that too. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. Does that help you deal with kind of like, not just mental health, but just anything in comedy? Does it just help to have those kind of people that are saying, hey, you know what, I know what you're going through, or I can relate, or whatever it is, because you don't feel so alone, I would imagine, when there's people agreeing with your decisions.
Yeah. You know, I'm very lucky to have the kind of support system that I have, honestly. My parents have been very supportive. My sister, you know, she's been training me on self-love and teaching me about things. She's sending me you know, links and you know, for journal entries and things like that. You know, she'll remind me like, hey, drink water, you know.
Yeah.
But a lot of the comedians have been very, very very positive. I mean, yeah, like you said, there's people that are like, oh, suck it up, and there's a lot of comedians out there that are like, oh, well, if you can't handle comedy, then get out.
Yeah, it's like, no.
Yeah, you know, and I've had people ask me like, oh, so you're quitting comedy? And like, you know, it's like, I'm not quitting, you know, it's something I love. I'm not quitting because I can't handle it. It's just, I'm just taking a break, guys. Like, I just want to smell the roses, you know?
Yeah.
But it was amazing, the response that I got from the post that you saw, that you mentioned about taking a break for my mental health, and just my inbox, you know, flooded with comedians and things. I had a comedian from Australia even message me like, hey, are you okay? I met him during COVID on a Zoom, on when we used to do our Zoom shows during the COVID time. Yeah, but just like the amount of impact that it made, I kind of got embarrassed. I kind of like hit the post because of like I said, like I didn't want too many people and like shining a spotlight on me. But it felt very encouraging to have that kind of support. And I think that we need to shine a light on mental health more and support each other and discuss more ideas about self-love and stuff. I grew up in the grunge and emo era where it was just cool to be sad.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah. And I love my sister for embracing the Gen Z sort of thing of, you know, hey, you know, like self-love, and here's some TikToks, and you know, like mental health is not a bad, you know, it's not a bad word anymore, kind of thing.
I was gonna say that it seems like the generation before us was like, I'm not sad, I can't be sad, like I'm tough, and then our generation is like, no, we're pretty sad, and then the generation after us was like, all right, we recognize that we're sad, but what can we do about it? Because we were just like, no, we're sad, like, and that's cool. And then the generation after us is like, hey, there's ways that we can like deal with this, and we can deal with this together. We don't need to be by ourselves to deal with this stuff. And that's really important. And that doesn't just go with comedy. If you're listening to this and let's say you're working 40 hours a week and you're like, hey, I need a break. If you can find a way to take that break, I recommend doing it. I remember I had a friend who, she was working this job that she loved, and she was like, dude, they are working me to the ground. Like, I am exhausted. They're taking advantage of me, whatever. And she goes, so I quit. And I was like, that is the best thing you could have done. And she's like, one of the things she said to me was like, you are probably the only person that actually said, good job at quitting. Because everybody else was like, what are you gonna do for money? What are you gonna do for this? It's like, dude, you need to take care of yourself. And that goes in any regard, right? So we've taken breaks from doing this. I love doing this podcast, but we've taken breaks because I've gotten overwhelmed. And I said, hey, you know what? We're going to pump the brakes a little bit, right? Does that mean we're done? No, it doesn't. It just means like, hey, we're, you know, it's like if you're working out and you're like, hey, I need to take a break. It's like, no, you're like, people aren't just going to keep going forever because, oh no, I can't stop. It's like, no, dude, take a break. Like,
you're exhausted.
You know? You know, so like that. So with all that being said, you mentioned you do have a couple shows coming up. What is on the plate for Sara Garza in the near future? You have those shows coming up. Are there certain dates that you could share with us? And then what are you looking forward to? Maybe is there like a goal that you have, you know, for the rest of the year?
Yes. Yes to all of that. Well, like I said, for April, like in major contrast to my March where I had 7 shows, in April I'm only doing 2, and that is for me because I'm exhausted right now. And I'm trying to myself, and so I'm trying to dedicate more time to working on myself. But I do have a 420 Comedy Fest in Robstown this month, the 15th. And then the 16th, very next day, I'm going to be working with Steven Sosa and Fred Madrigal from Laredo, Texas. We're going to be performing at Hyenas Comedy Club in Fort Worth, which is a big deal. We're doing the Red Room at Hyenas Comedy Club in Fort Worth, and it's going to be a really great show. I'm very, very excited about it. And then in May, we're going to have a lot more shows, a lot more Mother's Day shows, but there's going to be 2 shows in Laredo. May 6th at Wonder Lounge and May 27th at Cultura.
Okay.
Cultura Beer Garden.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to bring down... I have a lot more shows out of town, but for May. But for Laredoans, they can make it out to my shows. That'd be great. And I have a calendar, like a flyer of all my dates on both my Instagram and my Facebook if you want to check it out.
Sara Garza Comedy?
Yeah, at Sara Garza Comedy on Facebook and Instagram.
Nice. That is awesome. Is there a goal for the rest of the year? Is there something you want to work on yourself? You want to work on your comedy? What or both? Or
I also forgot. In June, I'm working with the Gateway Pride Association to bring down a LGBTQ comedy show here in Laredo for the Pride Festival. So that's gonna be really, really big, and I can't spoil any details yet, but that's gonna be good. Big. My project going forward right now is my videos and my content. My EPK, my electronic press kit, I feel like I'm lacking. Like I need to update my headshots and my videos. My videos are really old. So my next thing is to invest in my videos, my headshots, and hopefully launch my YouTube channel by the end of the year.
Awesome.
So you can catch my comedy. And I'm also working on merch. Right now I have my stickers. I'll be working on t-shirts next. So these are my next investment projects that I'm going to be working out throughout the year. So you can look forward to that. Yeah,
that's exciting stuff, which is, again, you're slowing it down a little bit, but again, that doesn't mean you're done. It sounds like you're, keeping the machine kind of going, right? Which is a good thing. If, again, you don't need to take a long break. Just kind of slow it down a little bit every now and then. Whatever you're doing, not just Sara. This isn't just Sara. This is for everybody.
Yeah, this is for anyone with mental health
problems.
Honestly, put yourself first. Take yourself out of toxic environments, whether it's, you have to quit a job or, break up with someone, move somewhere else. Whatever you have to do, take yourself out of that toxic environment. Take a break. Work on yourself. You'll be much happier. You won't regret it.
And there's a fear to doing all of that. There's a fear that will be there, but do it. Try it out. You know what I mean? Like, you're never going to know.
It's worth the risk.
Yeah. You're never going to know until you try it.
Maybe lose a bet and start comedy and see how it goes in 5 years.
Yeah, for sure. Lose a bet, lose your job, whatever. Anyway, Sara, thank you so much for coming on. It was really fun. It's been a while since I've talked to you, aside from the couple messages that we've sent here and there. So that was really fun. Everybody else, make sure you follow us on social media. Just Eric Alvarez Presents Your Show. And on Spotify, you can hit like a follow. There's like a follow button. There's like a like. I don't know. There's all these different buttons that you can press on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, all those podcast websites. So we'll be back again with another guest. We're going to have to get Steven Sosa and my brother George on here after you kind of, we're doing like the Marvel thing, right? Where we kind of like sprinkle them in here and then we're going to give them their own little movie or their own episode. So everybody, thank you so much for listening. And Sara, again, thank you so much.